Her name tag read, Jessica, and judging by her manner, you would think she owned this airline. But there was something she didn't know. I was actually the owner. My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 years ago, when it was on the brink of bankruptcy, I bought SkyElite Airways. Today, it is one of the most profitable airline companies in America. But no one knows this because I prefer to stay behind the scenes. No magazine covers, no press conferences, just quiet success. If you have ever been judged by the clothes you wear or the food you eat, this story is exactly for you. Because I learned new things about my own company, and the things I learned were not pleasant at all. Make sure you stay until the end, because what happened after this changed everything. Let's begin. This morning started like every morning. I woke up in my penthouse in New York. I checked the reports from the last 3 months. I decided to take one of our afternoon Los Angeles flights. I had meetings there, but most importantly, I wanted to experience our own service quality. That is why I fly regularly. Flying in economy class under a fake reservation name and seeing how my employees really treat passengers when they think no one is watching. Call it quality control. Call it a social experiment. In either case, it always reveals the truth. For this flight, I deliberately dressed simply because I did not want anyone to recognize me. Faded jeans, a plain gray hoodie, and worn-out sneakers. No designer labels, no jewelry, nothing that would hint at my real wealth. I tied my hair into a messy ponytail and took my old backpack instead of my usual leather briefcase. The transformation I experienced was tremendous. I looked no different from the other tired passengers, and that was exactly what I wanted. When I checked in at the gate, the staff glanced at me briefly. Just another face in the crowd. Perfect. Boarding the plane was chaotic as usual. Passengers were trying to find space for their carry-on luggage, and somewhere in the back, the sound of a baby crying could be heard. I moved down the narrow aisle toward seat 32F. Of course, the middle seat. The worst seat on any airplane. The man sitting in 32E by the window had already fallen asleep, and the aisle seat was empty. I shoved my backpack under the seat in front of me and settled in. The seat was narrow. The legroom was minimal. I made a mental note to discuss renovating our economy section at the next board meeting. The plane was slowly filling up, and my crew was working busily. From a distance, it looked like they were taking care of the passengers. I wondered what they were talking about over there. Some of them were genuinely warm and helpful. Maria, a young flight attendant with kind eyes, was patiently helping an elderly woman with her luggage. She was smiling at the passengers, addressing them by name, and making everyone feel welcome. I made a mental note to review her file later. I had taken it. But there was also Jessica, the woman I mentioned earlier. She was different. In the economy cabin, she acted as if she were doing all of us a favor. Her smile was plastic, and her face only lit up when she entered the first-class section. She never chatted pleasantly with people like us. I watched her laughing and chatting with the passengers at the front, treating them like royalty. We poor people were as if invisible. This contrast was striking and disturbing. We had clear company policies about showing equal respect to all passengers regardless of which class they were flying in. However, policies on paper mean nothing if they are not applied in practice. I took out my phone and pretended to browse the internet, but I was actually taking notes. I was noting times and names because revenge needed to be taken. The plane took off smoothly and continued flying at a certain altitude. The seatbelt warning light turned off, and the attendants began distributing meals. Even though I knew that economy meals were not exactly gourmet, I had specifically ordered the meal service for this flight. I wanted to experience it fully. When the cart came to my row, a small tray containing that cold chicken pasta I mentioned was given to me. It was appetizing exactly as one would expect from an airline company. I took my chicken pasta and started eating. The pasta was rubbery, and the sauce was also frozen. While continuing to eat, I reviewed the clauses in the company's contract in my mind. Just at that moment, Jessica came up to me and stood there beside me without saying a word. She was just standing there, in the aisle, with her arms crossed, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. At first, I thought I had food on my face or something. I looked at her with a questioning expression. "Can I help you?" I asked politely. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Actually, yes. You need to remove that." I blinked, confused. "Excuse me." "Your meal," she said, contempt dripping from her voice. "Economy passengers are not allowed to eat in this section." For a moment, I realized I might have misheard her, but what I heard was correct. I glanced around at the other passengers. No one else seemed to be having this problem. "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But I'm in my assigned seat. This is economy class. Where exactly am I supposed to eat?" Jessica's jaw tightened. It was clear she wasn't used to being questioned. "Meal service hasn't reached this row yet. You must have taken that food from another passenger or from another section. Either way, it needs to go back." I felt a flash of anger, but I stayed calm. What she was doing was completely ridiculous, but it reminded me of the purpose of why I had come to see things like this. "I was given this meal by one of your crew members," I explained slowly, as if speaking to a child. "Maria brought it a few minutes ago because I asked early. I am diabetic and needed to eat." That was a lie, but I wanted to see how she would handle a medical condition. I am the senior one on this aircraft, and I was not given such information. If you are going to lie, at least make it believable. The conversation was now heading in other directions. Other passengers kept looking at us, and we were drawing more and more attention. The woman in 32D had stopped eating and was watching us with eyes wide open, like reading coffee grounds. I could feel that familiar warmth of embarrassment creeping up the back of my neck. Not because I had done something wrong, but because this woman was deliberately humiliating me in front of everyone, and she was doing it because she thought I was nothing. After all, I was an economy passenger who couldn't fight back. "I am not making anything up," I said, my voice still calm but now sharper. "I requested this meal and it was given to me. I am eating in my assigned seat. I don't understand what the problem is." Jessica leaned toward me and said, "The problem is, sweetheart, that this airline has standards. We have rules. And when people like you try to take advantage of services they didn't pay for, it creates a problem for everyone." She said it in a way that no one else could hear. "People like you." Those words hung in the air. She didn't even know my name. She knew nothing about my past. Other than the fact that I was someone sitting in economy class, wearing a hoodie, she knew nothing about me. To her, that was reason enough to judge me. In fact, it was more than enough behavior for me to fire her as well. After all, she was acting as if I were trying to cheat the system. She was humiliating me in front of everyone. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I would not reveal who I was. I wanted to see how far they would go. I needed to see what kind of culture my own company had turned into without my knowledge. "I understand that you have rules," I said carefully, "but I am not breaking any of them. This is my meal at my seat. If there is a misunderstanding, perhaps we should call the cabin supervisor to resolve it." Jessica's face turned bright red. She straightened up and crossed her arms again. "I am the most senior authority in this cabin, and I am telling you to remove that meal immediately, or I will have to take more advanced action." She said it. She had no idea that I would be the one taking the real action. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. With her arms crossed and her face red with anger, she was standing over me. She had just said, "advanced action." What did that even mean? Was she going to forcibly take my meal tray, or call security? Surely they weren't going to throw me out of a plane in midair. The situation was heading into very ridiculous territory. If it weren't this infuriating, it could almost have been funny. Keeping my voice at the same level, I asked, "What kind of advanced action are you talking about?" Something resembling victory flashed in Jessica's eyes. She thought she had won. Small-minded. She thought she had put me in my place. "I can have you move to another seat. Or if you continue to cause trouble, I can report you for disruptive behavior. Trust me, you don't want that on your record." The other passengers were now openly watching us. Some looked uncomfortable. Others were watching out of curiosity, wondering where this would lead. The woman in 32D leaned forward slightly and whispered, "Just give her the tray, sweetheart. It's not worth the trouble." But it was worth the trouble. Because this wasn't just about me and my cold pasta. It was about how Jessica treated every passenger who didn't meet her own standards. Every person who flew in economy class. Every passenger who, in her eyes, didn't dress right, didn't speak right, or didn't look right. Calmly, I said, "I am not causing a disturbance."
I am eating my meal in my assigned seat. That is exactly what passengers are supposed to do on flights. Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, another voice cut through the tension. "Jessica, what's going on here?" It was Maria, the young flight attendant I had noticed earlier. A gentle concern was visible on her face as she approached us. Jessica's expression shifted slightly. "This passenger is causing a problem. She is eating a meal that is not assigned to her row." Maria looked confused, glancing from me to her. "But I gave that meal to her. She requested it early due to a medical condition. I logged it in the service log." I watched Jessica's face carefully. For about 1/10 of a second, I saw uncertainty flicker across it. But then her jaw hardened again, and she persisted. "You should have consulted me first. I am the senior flight attendant. All special requests go through my approval." Her ego was inflated as well. Maria's face fell. She looked to be in her mid-20s and did not want to go against her superior. "I'm sorry, Jessica. I thought it was a standard request. I didn't realize I needed approval for it." That apology sent blood rushing to my head. Maria had apologized even though she had done nothing wrong. She had only helped me, but here she was, apologizing because Jessica had invented an arbitrary rule to protect her power. "Maria did exactly the right thing," I said firmly. "She responded to a passenger's needs. That is good customer service." Looking at Jessica, she wasn't looking at me, but then she quickly turned her gaze toward me. "Excuse me, but you don't get to decide what good customer service is. That's my job." "Actually," I said slowly, "I think I have a bit of an idea about that." Something in my tone must have caught her attention because Jessica's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in my smile. "It means I know what good service looks like, and this isn't it." The color drained from Jessica's face again, turning almost purple. "That's enough. I'm moving you to another seat. Clearly you can't follow simple instructions." She reached for my meal tray, but I held it firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. I paid for this seat, and I'm staying here." "Then I'll call the cabin supervisor," Jessica snapped. "Perfect," I replied. "Please do." Jessica pulled out her phone and made a quick call. As she explained the situation to the person on the other end of the line, her voice was trembling with anger. She kept using phrases like difficult passenger, refusing to comply, and disturbing the cabin. Meanwhile, I quietly ate my cold pasta. Other passengers took out their phones and started recording us. After all, in today's world, everything went viral. Jessica either didn't realize or didn't care that she was creating a public relations nightmare. Within minutes, a tall man in a razor-sharp uniform appeared in the aisle. His name tag read, Robert Chen, Cabin Supervisor. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and a professional demeanor. He quickly surveyed the scene. I was sitting calmly in my seat with my meal tray. Jessica was standing in the aisle, looking furious. Maria was waiting nearby, visibly anxious, and about 30 passengers were watching intently. "What seems to be the problem here?" Robert asked, his voice neutral. Jessica immediately began telling her version of events, as if I had taken a meal I wasn't entitled to, how I had caused trouble and been disrespectful, how I had disturbed the other passengers. Robert listened without interrupting. Then he turned to me. "Ma'am, could you please share your side as well?" I set down my plastic fork and looked at him. "I requested the meal early due to a medical condition. Maria kindly provided it. I am eating it in my assigned seat. That is the entire situation." Robert glanced at Maria, who nodded in agreement. Then he looked back at Jessica. "I don't see any policy violation here." "But Jessica began. "She is an economy-class passenger eating a meal," Robert cut her off gently. "That is exactly what she is supposed to be doing." Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The cabin supervisor was on the side of the truth, that is, on my side. But the way she spoke to me, her disrespect, from what I observed, Robert said carefully, "You approached this passenger and demanded that she stop eating her meal. That is not protocol, Jessica. We do not treat our passengers this way." The watching crowd stirred. I could see some passengers nodding in agreement. Jessica stood there like poor slime stuck to the ground. She didn't know what to do. I thought it was time for this nonsense to end, and I reached into my bag. I took out my company ID. I held up my ID card so Robert could see it. His eyes instantly widened like a rabbit caught in headlights. Now everyone knew who I was. We had held several meetings about cabin service standards, and he had been one of my strongest advocates for treating all passengers equally. And now, he was personally witnessing all of these wrongdoings. "Ms. Chen," he said quietly, his voice just above a whisper, "I had no idea you were on this flight." Jessica's head darted back and forth between the two of us in shock. "Ms. Chen? What are you talking about? She's just an ordinary economy passenger." "Jessica," Robert cut her off, his voice tense. "This is Sarah Chen, the owner of SkyElite Airways, the CEO of this entire airline." Then there was silence, the kind of silence that weighed heavily on the ears. I watched as the realization crashed over Jessica like a massive wave. Her face went from purple to white within seconds. Her mouth opened, but she couldn't say a single word. The passengers around us began to whisper. The phone cameras recording us moved even closer. This moment would be all over social media within hours. "This is impossible," Jessica finally managed to say. "A CEO doesn't fly economy class. A CEO doesn't dress like this." I slowly stood up, placing my meal tray on my seat. A CEO regularly flies economy class to see how her employees treat passengers, and it seems there is a very good reason for that. I looked at the passengers watching us. I want everyone here to know that what happened today is unacceptable. This is not our company policy, and this is not who we are. I turned back to Jessica, who looked like she was about to be sick. "You judged me based on where I was sitting and what I was wearing. You decided I wasn't important and therefore didn't deserve respect. You humiliated me in front of dozens of people because you thought you would get away with it." My voice was calm but firm. "How many other passengers have you treated like this? How many people have you looked down on just because they couldn't afford first class?" I said. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know. If I had known who you were, I would never—" "Exactly," I cut her off. "If you had known I was the CEO, you would never have treated me this way. And that is the problem, Jessica. Whether they sit in first class or economy, every passenger deserves the same respect, whether they wear a suit or a hoodie, whether they are a CEO, a student, or a single parent traveling to see their family." I looked at Robert. "I want a full review of our customer service protocols. I want every flight attendant retrained on treating passengers with dignity. And I want to know if there are others like Jessica. I want to know all of them." Robert nodded quickly. "Absolutely, Ms. Chen. I will begin immediately. I turned to Maria, who was frozen in shock. Maria, you did everything right today. You were kind, professional, and attentive. That is exactly what we need more of. Come see me after we land. I want to talk about a promotion. Maria's eyes grew wide. Really? I mean, thank you, Miss Chen. Thank you so much. The surrounding passengers began to applaud. Some stood up to shake my hand. Others wanted to tell me about bad experiences they had had. I listened to each one and took mental notes. This wasn't just about Jessica. It was about a culture that had developed without proper oversight. A culture where status and appearance were more important than humanity. As for Jessica, I looked at her one last time. You are suspended pending a full investigation. Security will escort you until you leave the aircraft after we land. Whether you continue your job will depend on what we find in the investigation and whether you are truly willing to change. Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. She was aware that her career was hanging by a thread, and more importantly, she was aware of what had caused her to fall into this situation. I stayed in seat 32F for the rest of the flight. I finished my cold pasta. I even ordered coffee. Other passengers came over to chat, share their experiences, and thank me for standing up for economy passengers. I realized something very important. My privilege was not just about money or owning an airline. It was about having the power to create change. Most passengers who would have been in my place today would not have been able to defend themselves. They could have been silenced by bullying or even thrown off the plane. But I had a voice and a platform, and of course I was going to use it. When we landed in Los Angeles, I gathered my backpack and prepared to exit. Robert came over to me one last time. Miss Chen, I am deeply sorry for what happened today. I take full responsibility for not noticing this behavior earlier. I looked at him and nodded. Today, we both learned something, Robert. Now let's make sure this never happens again, I said reassuringly. Just as I expected, the videos went viral within hours. Videos of the confrontation were viewed millions of times. But instead of choosing to be a public relations disaster, I chose to bring people together.
Passengers praised our airline for having a CEO who truly cared about economy passengers. Job applications poured in from flight attendants who wanted to work at a company with real values. And in the following quarter, our customer satisfaction scores increased by 30%. As for me, I still regularly fly economy. I still dress simply. I still watch, and I still learn something new every day. Because the moment you stop checking is the moment standards begin to fall. And I never want another passenger to feel the way Jessica tried to make me feel that day. This story shows us that no matter what your seat number is or how many digits are in your bank account, everyone deserves equal respect. If this story touched you and you want to meet again at the center of stories that turn pain into power amid revenge-filled chaos, don't forget. I'm curious about your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned, my friend.